All right, good evening to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Tuesday, the 17th of December edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Hope you're enjoying the content here on the channel 7 days a week. We will have the live stream this upcoming Sunday as well. But there is plenty of things going on at the moment here, so be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. This is a vertical crossed vertical profile of the atmosphere extending from 10 millibars up at the upper levels of the stratosphere all the way down to the surface. And you can see that we've had a lot of blocking. These reddy colours represent blocking within the atmosphere, and really through the lower portions of the Arctic atmosphere up into the mid levels from about 100 to 50 millibars. You can see quite a lot of blocking during the period between mid-September, early to mid-September, all the way through to the middle portions of the end portion of October. Then we've seen a little bit of a weakening in that. Then we've seen the return of blocking within the Arctic region here. So this is 65 degrees north, 65 to 90 degrees north, by the way. So this is a vertical cross section of the Arctic atmosphere, so to speak. But you notice here that we've got some blues representing some fairly cold temperatures away up between 50 and 10 millibars here. And what's expected to take place is that these blues are expected to continue to start to propagate down into the 50 millibar level. And what that does is that tends to reflect more on the tropospheric profile. So we've had a fairly strong upper level portion of the stratosphere. We've had slightly weaker down at the 50 millibars, and the troposphere, the polar vortex within the troposphere has been somewhat weaker than what we've seen up in the stratosphere. So this is the disconnect, the decoupled vertical structure within the Arctic atmosphere, and you can see it quite nicely here. We've got a lot of blocking in the lower portions of the vertical profile. We've had some cooling taking place really from about mid-November up until now, and you notice how that's starting to kind of work its way down through towards 50 millibars. So if we look at this chart here, it shows quite nicely that that structure at the 10 to 50 millibar level here. So you can see this is the 10 millibar level, and due to that blocking within the mid and lower levels of both stratosphere and the troposphere, we've got this heat flux showing up on the Eurasia side of the pole. If we go out to 10 days from now, you notice that warmth disappears, and that would suggest that we're going to see strengthening of the polar vortex. Another way to look at it is the mean zonal winds, and you can see that they are actually record strong according to the ECMWF model. So this is obviously looking at the strength of the winds blowing around the vortex at 10 millibars, and the skinny red line at the top is record strong. The thick red line in the middle is the climatological average, and the red line at the very bottom is record weak mean zonal wind. So you measure the strength of the polar vortex in two ways: temperature at the core, but also the mean zonal winds. The slacker those winds, the greater the chance of seeing colder air getting released, not just downwards through the atmosphere, but also southwards away from the Arctic. But generally speaking, we are record strong, which means that we're tightening the vortex up, and that is likely to increase the westerlies and therefore keep the continents, whether it be North America, Europe, or even Asia, warmer than average, unfortunately, if you want to see cool weather. But you can see here that there is a dip, which is interesting, right up at around Monday the 30th of December. You can see the thick red line representing the ensemble mean. So this is the average of all the members. And you can see that we dip. It stays above average though. That's the take home. But we do see a weakening. And you're asking the question, why are we seeing that weakening taking place? We'll get to that in just a second. But if you look at what I think is the more important 50 millibar level, and I think the 50 millibar level is somewhat more of a mirror image of what you would expect to see at 500 millibars. And 500 millibars is generally the ceiling in which our weather begins at the top and works its way down to the surface of the Earth. So if we look at the 50 millibar level, you can see here that we've got a low pressure system centered near Svalbard. Generally, we've got a lot of cold temperatures, low heights over the Eurasia and North Atlantic side of the pole. What does that mean? What does this suggest? It means that this next chart makes sense. If we look at the northern hemispheric view, it's actually very similar to what the 50 millibar level in the lower stratosphere looks like. You can see here all these low heights over Greenland, over the northern Europe here, for example. We've got a lot of high heights extending from eastern Central Asia all the way across into the North American side of the pole, and you've actually got some cross-polar flow going on here at 500 millibars between Siberia and northern North America. But generally, when you've got low heights over anywhere from the Baffin Straits through Greenland into northern portions of Europe and over Iceland, you've got above average heights. Further south, you've got a very westerly flow, and generally that blue line, by the way, represents where the position of the jet stream is, and you can see it's quite far north, both over North America, it's on the Canadian-US border, for example, and then also over northern UK. It means that the majority of both North America and Europe is actually on the warm side of the jet, and that is not a particularly great look if you're looking for cool weather. So the 50 millibar level within the stratosphere makes sense based on what we're seeing in the upcoming 7-day period here, of the model here. So this is the 50 millibar level. Let's go all the way out to 168 hours now and see what it's indicating. And we're actually congregating the lowest heights, the core of coldest temperatures within the polar vortex, bang slap over the Arctic region. And if we look at back to the chart here, you can see as we play through the loop. Let's go to the equatorial view. I quite like this as well. So you can see here all the low heights extending from the Baffin Straits through Greenland and north of the UK. We've got these positive heights. There's the jet position here. Goes a little bit up towards northern British Columbia here. It dips towards the Great Lakes and then exits around the northern shores of Newfoundland across the Atlantic and into UK here. If we play through and skip out to the 7 to 14 day period, you can see here that we're keeping this theme going. This is now the period that incorporates Christmas and towards New Year. Still low heights north of the UK, and we've got quite a lot of positive heights over UK and Ireland, representing a continuation of this mild theme. This is reinforced, by the way, by the simple fact that we're coming out of, we're still in the warm phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation. So coupling the strengthening of the PV at 10 millibars down in towards the lower stratosphere, that is then going to lower the heights over the Arctic region. That's going to force the Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation to go positive, and therefore we're locked generally in a mild theme. The one thing that I want to say is, though, that with a westerly flow, with areas of low pressure likely to cross either near or just to the north of the UK, you've got an opportunity for still something colder on the backside of these lows. So obviously, if the lows to the west, you're in that mild southerly flow. When the lows pass to the east, you're in colder air. And we'll see that this week. We're going to see milder push of air over the next 24, 36 hours. Once that area of low pressure pushes through with its wind and rain, we're going to see colder air on the backside. But generally speaking, the stratosphere, troposphere, polar vortex is going to strengthen. We're going to see the heights coming down over the Arctic. That's going to shift the Arctic oscillation and North Atlantic oscillation positive. We're still in phase 5 of the MJO. That is a warm phase. Now, the GFS ensemble is trying to, goes into the null phase, so it dissipates the amplitude. The enhancement of convection kind of weakens within phase 5, which is Indonesia, maritime continent. It goes into the null phase and it tries to come back out in phase 7. Phase 7 being the West Pacific. So let's have a quick look at that and see what the modelling is indicating here in terms of the area of convection. This is a very important thing in terms of this, and I want to show you a tweet by Christian on Twitter in just a second, because it's rather interesting in terms of what he's saying. That was one of the points that I was wanting to try and make, actually. So just bear with a second. Let's have a look at the 200 millibar CHI anomaly. So this is showing up the current position, essentially, of the MJO at the moment here. So we've got the enhanced convection over the maritime continent. So there's your classic phase 5 MJO. And as we play through here, you can see that we do have some convection trying to slide eastwards, but the problem is we've got cooling now near the dateline over the equator. That means that the MJO is going to essentially collapse as it meets that colder waters over the equatorial Pacific. We do have some convection to the north of that right enough, but the problem is that that is not a great indicator for the return of a negative AO, NAO, and a colder pattern overall. There's a lot more wind towards mild at the moment, whether it's the stratospheric polar vortex or the MJO. I'm afraid there is quite a lot of negatives here with regards to the favourability for cold developing. Now, I want to show you this here real quick, because Christian certainly knows his stuff. I really do appreciate his information that he delivers on Twitter. Certainly worth a follow if you haven't already done so. This is an interesting one here. This is Clooney in the West Highlands. Over the last 36 hours, this was from last night, by the way, 180.4 millimeters rain fallen within the last 36 hours. We've seen a significant amount of rain, and if you look at the radar, this is the latest significant amounts of rain now pushing in to western and northern areas. By the way, we're actually quite dry across the north of the UK, so this would be good news. I'm going to talk about that in a little while in terms of the significance of this drier than average theme as we go towards next year and possibly towards summertime next year. But you can see here where the MJO was definitely missing this Central Pacific region, and the reasons for that is that we've got cooler waters here. The MJO wants to go where the waters are cold, or warm, sorry, not cold, warm. So look at this here. There's the phase 7-8 of the MJO right here, and unfortunately we've cooled these waters. My concern is that with the cooling over the West Indian Ocean and over the Central Pacific, warmest waters over the maritime continent, that means that we could start to hold the MJO in the phases of 3, 4, and 5, which are either mild or mild and stormy. So you can see quite a lot of things that are not going as you would expect if you want to see cool weather. The good slight take home from this is this. See, as we play right the way through here, this is the period now between Friday the 27th of December, Friday the 3rd of January. You start to notice that the GFS extended is trying to start to build heights over northern North America, the North Atlantic, as well as Greenland. We're starting to see negatives showing up over Europe here. So we're shifting that high back towards the North Atlantic, up towards Greenland. We're starting to see a sneaky low developing to the east here. So is that something to maybe look at in terms of, do we see the MJO start to go towards perhaps even the Atlantic? And that can sometimes help just give the atmosphere that little jab back towards something a little bit colder. Start to see lower heights further south, higher pressure up towards the Arctic region. Let's have a look at the northern hemispheric view. I will get there in the end. And you can see that we've got quite a lot of positive heights slightly to the west. The problem is that we may have that high holding over the UK and Ireland, so maybe a little bit too close to the UK and Ireland to allow that flow to come in more from the north. But we'll wait and see what happens. Still a long way out, but interesting nonetheless what's going on. So let me see, get back to the case in point. Christian's tweet. We'll look at this just now. Just bear with me a second. So this was a tweet here put out on the 16th, so yesterday, and there's a few elements to this, but he says tropical convection over the Pacific in January, yes or no. It is not easy to predict the evolution of the MJO in the coming weeks, also due to the Indo-Pacific maritime continent barrier effect. That's an interesting one, actually. I'm always learning from this guy. With sub-seasonal forcing, that complicates the forecast. So if we click on this image here, the barrier effect of the Indo-Pacific Maritime Continent, MC, on the Austral summertime MJO is explored using retrospective forecasts from sub-seasonal to seasonal prediction models. The general MJO prediction skills is the S2S models are elevated. I know this is complicated. I know some people get this, some folk won't. Sorry about that if you don't. And the top performing models are identified. We select two sets of observed MJO events continuously propagating across the MC into the Western Pacific. So that's the maritime continent into the West Pacific and blocked by the MC. The continuously propagating MJO events are better predicted than the blocked MJO events for their systematic eastward propagating behaviour, especially in the ocean atmosphere coupled models. Although the best four models and their ensemble consistently produce greater prediction skills of the continuously propagating MJOs, the all model ensemble is not better than the top performing models. Our analysis suggests that a realistic presentation of Earth-sea interaction over the West Pacific is crucial for better MJO prediction. So let's see what else he says here further down. So the convection can remain over the maritime continent for a long time or move with a strong magnitude towards the Pacific or the Atlantic. So again, there is an element here where the MJO is potentially going to get stuck over phases 4 and 5, and that would likely enhance the stratospheric polar vortex as well as the tropospheric polar vortex. So in other words, strengthen it. However, it is not excluded that the convection, given the strong subsidence that creates interference to the MJO, could be very weak over the Pacific and collapse directly in the Atlantic in phases 8 and 1. So you get this kind of skipping over of the convection. It goes from essentially from the maritime continent and actually re-emerges over the Atlantic. That's what he's basically saying, as far as I can see from this here. So strong subsidence interfering with the tropical convection, weakening the effects on the Pacific Ocean. And obviously when you've got those cold waters over the central Pacific, you then see the MJO kind of skip. Now that warm waters to the north of the equatorial belt, be interesting to see if that can help out in terms of reshaping and recasting the upper atmosphere. So he quickly goes on to say also, if this transition towards the Atlantic occurs, a coupled stratospheric as well as tropospheric polar vortex is very likely after Christmas, since we will not have a phase in which momentum toward transport towards the stratosphere occurs with planetary wave breaking. So in other words, all the collapsing of the heights over the Arctic region then tightens the PV over the troposphere, and as well as that, aloft up into the stratosphere as well. That's just going to essentially reinforce the westerlies, lift the positive heights within the middle latitudes northwards. Then that forces the jet stream further north, and we are locked in a very, very mild setup. Currently, the stratospheric polar vortex is very strong, while the tropospheric polar vortex is still average and not so strong for the moment. So we've obviously seen that because of the blocking that we've seen within the troposphere and extending into the lower portions of the stratosphere, but we're starting to see the strength of the PV now propagate down towards the 50 millibar level. Then that usually reflects underneath into the troposphere. So yes, it's not looking overly promising, if I'm being quite honest with you. I hope you've enjoyed some of this analysis here, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we go on beyond the New Year period. Interesting to see whether the GFS extended indicates this positive heights building to the west of the UK and Ireland, up into Greenland, up into the Arctic region. Do we see the cold then getting released southwards from the pole? What would also be an interesting one, by the way, is strengthening the PV at the moment here. If we do get some significant weakening, there's been a lot of build-up of cold over the current period and over the next couple of weeks that could release a significant cold spell if we were to somehow weaken that belt of strong winds and core of cold over top. So yes, that is it for now. Like I said before, the run up to Christmas looking rather mild, potentially anticyclonic or high pressure dominated. But what we need to consider is the fact that these areas of low pressure can not only pull a lot milder northwards, but they also can bring some temporary cold in the backside of these lows as well. So it might not all be plain sailing with regards to the Christmas New Year period just yet. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. A little bit technical, I do appreciate, but it looks as if mild is going to rule the next few weeks anyway. Stay tuned, like and subscribe. See you tomorrow with more.